Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
I'm Jason Miller. Tonight on the Evan Miller Report, according to Iraqi officials, Saddam Hussein's top deputy has been killed. We have the latest out of the region tonight. South Africa shops have been looted despite call for peace by South Africa's president. Boko Haram has slit throats of many as 12 people as the army tries to save civilians. In the UK, jobless figures dominate campaigning today as we continue our coverage of the UK elections. And in our fight against global socialism tonight, one U.S. senator is back at a campaign to put a female face on the $20 bill. Plus, in Kansas, lingerie is no longer on the bill for welfare recipients. All those stories and more, plus Corey Evans.
Happy Friday to you, Jay. Turns out the parents of one Boston bombing victim don't want Tsarnaev executed. I wonder why. LA Unified wants their money back from Apple, and the Securities and Exchange Commission wants a bite out of LA Unified. In our continuing battle against global socialism, Apple, speaking of them, have had a stunt in their growth as they try to become a $1 trillion company. I have a lawsuit about voting to talk about out of Ohio. And TV's longest-running variety show is going out on top. And we're on top of things today here at your conservative news source, the Evan Miller Report, starting now.
Live from Southern California, this is the Evan Miller Report. Jason Miller with news and politics, Corey Evan with business and entertainment. This is the Evan Miller Report on SHR Media and Public Press Radio. Here now, Jason Miller.
And a very good evening on this Friday, April the 17th, 2015. I'm Jason Miller, along with Corey Evan this evening.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Happy Friday to all of you. Hopefully you're having a good Friday.
Yes, certainly hope everybody is having a great Friday tonight. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we do have some breaking news coming into the newsroom as we are going on air tonight. And this just coming in from 9 News in Australia. 5 teenagers have been arrested in Melbourne in a counter-terrorism operation, with 2 18-year-olds accused of plotting an attack on police. The Joint Counterterrorism Task Force Operation Rising resulted in 7 search warrants being executed earlier this morning in Australia's southeast city. An 18-year-old Harlem man and an 18-year-old Hampton Park man in Australia have been charged with terrorism-related offenses. They have been accused of planning an attack targeting police officers. An 18-year-old man and a 19-year-old man are also in custody and are assisting with police inquiries. Searches are continuing. This is a developing story, so stay with the Evan Miller Report, and we will continue to bring you the breaking details on this breaking story. And we can tell you right now that Australian officials from the Australian Federal Police are speaking right now in a news conference. We're going to keep an eye on that news conference. If there is anything new to come out of that news conference, we will obviously bring it to you right here on the Evan Miller Report tonight. Other news we're following tonight: he was the last member of Saddam Hussein's inner circle still on the run, depicted with his distinctive red mustache as the king of clubs on the U.S. military's deck of cards of the most wanted Iraqi regime fugitives. Now officials say they believe government forces killed Izzati Ibrahim al-Duri near Tikrit, where the former deputy to Saddam Hussein was working alongside with Daesh militants. Reports of al-Duri's death came Friday as Iraqi forces tried to push back Daesh group fighters in the South Home province, where Tikrit is located. Government troops took back several towns near Iraqi's largest oil refinery at Benji, officials said. Further north, a car bomb exploded next to the U.S. consulate in the city of Erbil, a rare attack in the capital of the Kurdish autonomous zone that killed 3 people and wounded 5. U.S. officials said no Americans were hurt and no casualties among consulate personnel or guards. Over to South Africa now, where foreign-owned shops in South Africa have been attacked and looted in East Johannesburg, the latest in a series of Zimbabwe attacks. A standoff developed in the city with police forming a barrier between an angry crowd and foreign-owned shops. The violence comes despite Thursday's rally against xenophobia in the coastal city of Durban and condemnation from President Jacob Zuma. At least 5 people have died in anti-foreigner attacks in recent weeks. Migrants, mostly from other African states and Asia, have moved to South Africa in large numbers since white minority rule ended in 1994. Or at least that is what is being stated in that country. Alright, moving on. Boko Haram militants have slit the throats of 12 people in northeast Nigeria as the army was trying to evacuate civilians from the area, according to a military source and a witness said today. The Islamic group had been driven out of much of the huge swath of territory they controlled at the start of the year, thanks to a concentrated push by troops from Nigeria and neighboring countries Chad, Niger, and Cameroon. The town of Gazwa, in a mountainous terrain, was one of the last places to fall on March the 27th, and there still remains pockets of Boko Haram activity in the area, according to security sources. A witness, Jonas Musa, told Reuters and ITN his parents were both among the victims. He said soldiers had moved one wave of people from the hills around Josua, but before they could go back for the second, the attackers struck. Failure to crush Boko Haram or protect civilians was one reason President Goodluck Jonathan lost the election on March the 28th, according to some in the country, to Mohamed Burki, who was a former military dictator. And staying in Africa tonight, a man indicted in the United States for allegedly smuggling heroin in a case that was a basis for the TV hit show Orange is the New Black has been elected a senator in Nigeria. Burja Karshma was little known before he returned home back in 2003 from the UK, where he beat a U.S. extradition order to become a major financer of President Goodluck Jonathan's party. Election results posted late Wednesday identified Kashma as senator-elect in the southwest Oregon state. Opponents are challenging his victory in court, saying ballots were rigged. Kashma's spokesman, Asta Oinkur, said it was important to clarify there is not any order for extradition by any court, whether in Nigeria or the UK, the US, or anywhere for that matter. Kashmir 56 has said the 1998 indictment by a grand jury in the North District of Illinois for a conspiracy to import and distribute heroin in the U.S. is a case of mistaken identity. He said the Chicago prosecutors really want the dead brother he closely resembles. All right, so here's over to Asia now, more predominantly China tonight, where they have jailed a top journalist for 7 years for leaking a confidential paper to a foreign website. Gen Yu, 71, had illegally provided state secrets to foreigners, according to a court in Beijing. China has not confirmed which documents the case relates to, but it is thought to be a Communist Party strategy paper known as Document Number 9. The paper is said to call for aggressive restrictions on democracy, civil society, and the press. Amnesty International called the sentence an affront to justice. Gaia was the victim of vaguely worded and arbitrary state secret laws that are used against activists as part of the authorities' attack on freedom of expression, said William Ni, China's researcher at the rights group. Sheng Bing, one of her lawyers, said they were very disappointed with the verdict and would appeal in her case. Over to Argentina, where they have begun legal proceedings against 3 British and 2 U.S. companies for drilling oil near the Falkland Islands. Daniel Filmus, Argentina's minister for the islands, called the Malvins locally announced the case in London. The companies involved are Falkland Oil and Gas, Premier Oil, Rockhopper, Edison International, no, I don't think that is a relation to the United States version of Edison here in the United States. If I can have Corey Evan confirm that for me, that would be great before I finish the end of that story. And Noble Energy. Mr. Filmus told the BBC the companies were performing illegal acts by entering Argentina territory. He added, I want to make it clear for the directors of these companies and for British public opinion that Argentina will use the full force of the law, both national and international law, to prevent these countries from taking the riches, which belong to 40 million Argentina citizens. Argentina has extradition treaties from around the world, and we intend to use them. He also added that the area being drilled was as much as ours as the center of Buenos Aires. Neither the UK nor any other country would allow anyone to enter the territory and take away their riches. In response, UK Foreign Secretary Philip Hammond accused the Argentines of outrageous bullying. He said the islanders had a perfect right to develop their own economic resources, and Argentina needs to stop this kind of behavior, start acting like a responsible member of the international community. The Falkland Islands government also said the Argentinians had no case. We have the right to develop our economy, including the hydrocarbons industry, and we are exercising that right, it said. It's worth remembering that it was the government of Argentina who walked away from working with the Falkland Islands on development of hydrocarbons industry some years ago. Argentine domestic law does not apply to the Falkland Islands, and this is the latest action, is clearly another attempt by Argentina to block an economic growth in the Falkland Islands. Okay, thank you very much. Corey Evan just sent me that the message over that indeed the folks over here who are being sued in the likes of Edison International, it does share the same U.S. subsidiary here at home. So, ladies and gentlemen, especially for our California audience living in, you maybe want to watch your electric bill because it just might go up a little bit. All right, folks.
And that's what I observed anyway in my search.
All right. Thank you very much, Corey, for tracking that down for me. I certainly appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to some UK news. Not that we haven't been talking about the UK, but more UK home news. Charges against 9 journalists accused of making illegal payments to public officials have been dropped by the Crown Prosecution Service in the UK. 9 of those 12 journalists awaiting trial under Operation Elvedon will not be prosecuted after an urgent review. The Society of Editors called the investigation and prosecution of journalists an incredible fiasco. But the Director of Public Prosecutions defended the decisions to prosecute the journalists. John Luncoy, royal editor at The Sun, said the investigation and prosecutors had been politically motivated and without justification. They are no longer face prosecution under Operation Elvedon, the Metropolitan Police investigation into alleged inappropriate payments to police public officials include former News of the World editor Andy Coulson. The CPS said it decided to continue with the prosecutions of 3 Sun journalists, Jamie Pyatt, Chris Pagno, and in a separate case, Anthony France. All 3 are accused of paying off police officers. 7 public officials will also continue to face charges, according to the CPS. Mr. Coulson faces a separate trial in Scotland due to start next month over allegations of perjury. There is a list of people who were charged over alleged payments who will no longer face charges, and what we will do, folks, we don't have the time this evening to say everyone who was involved in that was not being charged, but we will state, ladies and gentlemen, that the announcement comes after 3 journalists were found not guilty of illegally paying off public officials at London's Old Bailey. And we'll post this full story up on our Facebook page, facebook.com/The Evan Miller Report. And, ladies and gentlemen, time for the latest in our UK election news tonight. And we started off with new unemployment numbers coming better than expected today. David Cameron has hailed those new figures, which show unemployment is at a 7-year low, but the Labour says too many jobs are part-time. The Prime Minister said the coalition had overseen a jobs miracle and the UK had created more jobs since 2010 than the rest of the EU put together. Unemployment fell by 76,000 to 1.84 million in the 3 months to February, according to official statistics. Labour welcomed the fall, but accused the Tories of ignoring low pay growth. The economy moved center stage again after Thursday's television election debate, in which Labour leader Ed Miliband and 4 other party leaders clashed over the deficit, immigration, health, and defense. Mr. Cameron and the Lib Dem leader Nick Clegg did not take part. In other election news today, Mr. Miliband insisted later and continued to insist Labour would never join a coalition with the Scottish National Party. UKIP's Nigel Farage will be among leaders to face audience questions in regional broadcast, the BBC announced today. And the latest poll for the Conservatives, Pierre Lord Ashcroft, suggested that the SNP has made gains in Labour's strong points and Lib Dem territory. Thursday's BBC debate was watched by 4.3 million people, according to overnight figures, and almost a quarter of British Asians have yet to decide how to vote, according to research. The Ulster Unionist Party lodged their own manifesto after the Northern Ireland parties held their first TV debate as well. And for more on those unemployment numbers in the UK, we'll be posting that story as well on our Facebook page, facebook.com/The Evan Miller Report. I'm sure Corey Evan will have the latest stock news here in the U.S. and how U.S. stocks reacted to that good news coming out of the UK as well. And speak of Corey Evan, it's now time for the latest national news here in the U.S.
Thank you, Jay. The parents of Martin Richard, the 8-year-old boy killed in the Boston Marathon bombings 2 years ago, have written a plea to end the attention convicted killer Dzhokhar Tsarnaev has received and spare him from the death penalty. This according to Boston.com. In an essay written for the Boston Globe, Bill and Denise Richard asked that the case come to a close, writing, quote, "We know that the government has its reasons for seeking the death penalty, but the continued pursuit of that punishment could bring years of appeals and prolong reliving the most painful day of our lives," unquote. On April 8th, Tsarnaev was convicted on all 30 counts against him, of course, including being responsible for the death of Martin Richard. The penalty phase of the trial, where the jury will decide whether to give Tsarnaev the death penalty or whether he'll live the rest of his life in prison, is scheduled to begin on Tuesday. In the essay, the Richards continued, quote, "As long as the defendant is in the spotlight, we have no choice but to live a story told on his term, not ours. The minute the defendant fades from our newspapers and TV screens is the minute we begin the process of rebuilding our lives and our family." Interesting little take on this situation, Jay?
Certainly is. I can't understand why the family would have that opinion, but certain people are entitled to their opinion on that. Don't necessarily agree with it. I honestly think the guy should be hung in the middle of the square where that Boston Marathon was going right when that bombing went off. That's just my own.
Yeah, but it is unfortunate that the appeals process is so long and drawn out in many cases. At least that's what we've seen in California.
Certainly. Well, California death sentences and death chambers, that's another conversation for another day.
Exactly. Back to the news, though. A New York jury deliberating in the murder trial of a man accused of kidnapping and killing 6-year-old Eitan Pates in 1979 has asked to review a confession and other evidence. This from the Washington Post. Pedro Hernandez says he choked Eitan in a convenience store basement after luring him there with the promise of a soda. Eitan disappeared May 25th, 1979, and his body was never found. Jurors asked Friday to see a missing person poster to Hernandez at a police before he confessed. They also requested his videotaped confession and some witness statements. The jury went home for the weekend without reaching a verdict. Deliberations are to resume Monday. Hernandez's lawyer says the confession was imaginary and his client is mentally ill. Prosecutors say the confession is sound. Deliberations begin. I love how lawyers will sometimes try to defend their clients even when they are guilty.
Cry me a river.
Yeah, even if he's not guilty, this whole thing sounds combobulated, as Judge Judy might phrase it.
Certainly.
More on lawsuits later on, in lawsuits across America, of course.
Certainly.
And here's one that people in Washington have been buzzing about, Washington State, that is. A semi-truck carrying millions of bees overturned on North I-5 near the I-405 Friday morning, shutting down 2 lanes of traffic. Yes, Linwood, Washington, thy name is Buzzer. The truck driver says it happened after he blew a tire while merging from I-405 to I-5. But a Washington State Patrol spokesman says it appears the driver may have been going too fast. The truck was carrying 458 honeybee hives. WSP said about 26 to 30,000 bees were in each hive, meaning that just under 14 million bees were in the truck. Many of the bees were killed in the accident, of course. An effort was being made to save as many of the remaining bees as possible. Officials said the bees were relaxed before dawn, but it was clear that they were becoming much more active after the sun came up. The truck driver, a 36-year-old from Idaho, was not hurt. The truck was headed for a blueberry farm in Linden. Very unfortunate situation there. Hopefully the bees...
This is not my fault. This was not built to coat.
Absolutely not built to coat. No better. And a man apparently upset over business.
All right, folks, look like we lost Corey Evan there in the transition. Those bees must have got into our satellite feed tonight, so we apologize on that, ladies and gentlemen. We'll get back to Corey when we are able to. All right, the U.S. government must return 10 exceptionally rare gold coins worth millions of dollars each to a Pennsylvania family from which the purloined coins were seized a decade ago, according to a federal appeals court that ruled today. By a 2-to-1 vote, the Third U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in Philadelphia said Joan Langford and her sons Roy and David are the rightful owners. Well, we could say royal too, considering how much they're worth, of the double-edged $20 gold pieces after the government ignored their claim to the coins and missed a deadline to seek their forfeiture. The government knew that it was obligated to bring a judicial civil forfeiture proceeding or to return the property, but refused, said Circuit Judge Marjorie Rendell, who wrote, having failed to do so, it must return the double eagles to the landlords. Patricia Hartman, a spokesman for the U.S. Attorney Zane Merger in Philadelphia, said, quote, we are weighing our options. The Philadelphia Mint, back in 1933, produced 445,500 double eagles, but they were not circulated because President Franklin Roosevelt tried to halt a bank panic, removed the gold coins from circulation, and made ownership of large amounts illegal. Most of the coins were melted down, but a few were smuggled out, including one that fetched $7.6 million. That's right, folks, million with an M, at a 2002 auction after once being possessed by Egypt's King Farouk. The government had long suspected, without proving, that the late Israel Swit, a gold dealer and father of Joan Langford, had smuggled some of the coins with the help of a mint employee. It seized the Langford's double eagles after the family located the coins in a safe deposit box once belonging to Swift and sought to have the mint authenticate them. But when the Langfords filed a seized asset claim back in September 2005, the government neither returned the coins nor sought their forfeiture within 90 days, as required under the Federal Civil Assessment Forfeiture Reform Act. Try saying that after a few sherbets. The family sued, but a federal jury in July 2011 said the government will keep the coins, and the trial judge later agreed. Rendell, though, said the CAFRA violation justified the coins be returned. Barra Berkey, a lawyer for the landlord, said the landlords are thrilled to receive their property back after fighting to vindicate their rights for over a decade. The case is Landmark versus U.S. Department of the Treasury, 3rd U.S. Circuit of Appeals, number 12-4574. For those of you who want to get more information on this story. And not often I get into the old lawsuits across America, in this case lawsuits with the federal government, Corey Evan, but today I made an exception, especially when considering those coins worth that much money. That amount of money could actually start paying off a good chunk of the U.S. debt.
Yeah, I know, right? And there was actually another coin that was actually stolen, bought, hidden, and then seized by the Treasury Department. And it was actually stored for a period of time at the World Trade Center, but then they moved it to Fort Knox just 8 months before the terror attacks. And it later went to auction. And I believe it fetched a little more than $7 million, if I'm not mistaken. I'll verify that.
Absolutely right. All right, Corey, we're going to go ahead and send it back to you. You were just starting another story there before we lost you due to the bees deciding to get into our satellite systems. Take it away.
Right. A man apparently upset over a family business dispute snapped before fatally shooting his two brothers, his mother and his sister-in-law, and then killing himself at a home in Phoenix, police said on Friday, according to Reuters. The shooter was found by police in an upstairs bedroom with a self-inflicted gunshot wound after Thursday's incident, according to Trent Crump, sergeant, a police spokesman for Phoenix. The victims all suffered multiple gunshot wounds in what police described as a blood-splattered crime scene. The victims and gunmen were aged between 28 and 75, Crump said. None of them are so far being named by police. Crump said witnesses described how one of the brothers snaps or loses it. He said the man apparently killed his brother downstairs, his brothers, that is, with an S at the end, before shooting and killing his mother when she arrived at the house to see what was happening. He then went upstairs and fatally shot his sister-in-law before turning the gun on himself, investigators said. Crump told a news conference, quote, "It's very obvious that whether it was the heat of passion of the moment or the anger of what happened, he certainly went to great lengths to make sure that each of them were dead." The suspect's wife and two children, 11-month-old and 3-year-old girls, escaped through a downstairs sliding glass bedroom door, Crump said. A female relative also was able to flee about an hour after the shootings, Crump said, and told investigators the incident had escalated from an argument over a family business. Police said the family owned businesses including a transport company and several restaurants. And the union trying to organize Boeing's South Carolina plant withdrew its petition for an April 22nd election, citing a toxic environment and gross violations of workers' lawful organizing rights. The decision, which delays the date for an election by at least 6 months, was made after organizers for the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers conducted home visits with more than 17 workers. The IAM said withdrew its petition for the vote.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, looks like we lost Corey Evan once again. I do apologize. All right, meantime, we're going to go ahead and take a short break. Hopefully, we can get our connection fixed with Corey Evan. We'll be right back.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
How you doing? John Grant here. When I'm not slaving over a hot microphone on the 405radio.com Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, I check out Sean and Clint here at Sackheads Radio. We all appreciate the best political bloggers, writers, and commentators. We either get them on our shows or we make fun of them, as it should be. So check us out live Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern or forever on the podcasts on the 405radio.com.
This is Tammy Jackson, inviting you to join me on the Tammy Jackson Show every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Pacific on the 405radio.com. Put down that remote and tune into the show that covers politics, guns and the Second Amendment, religious liberties, sanctity of life, the military, and more. I host newsworthy guests and work hard to be a conservative radio show that's not like all the others. So save Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific for me, Tammy Jackson, on the 405media.com.
Hello, I'm Paul, a student at Hillsdale College. Here is my professor, Dr. Larry Arnn, on the separation of church and state.
America's founders believed in the separation of church and state, in that the country was not to have an official religion or an official sect. But that did not mean that government was to be hostile to religion, or even indifferent to religion, as many today argue. In fact, America's founding document, the Declaration of Independence, includes both a reference to God as the author of the laws of nature and a confident assertion that human beings are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Far from being hostile or indifferent to religion, America's founders understood the theology of the Declaration to be an essential part of the education of citizens.
This Constitution Minute was brought to you by Hillsdale College. To join the national conversation on the Constitution, go to constitutionminute.org.
Hi, this is Rooster from Outcry Radio. Catch me here on Blog Talk Radio every Saturday night at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or follow my blog.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Well, it turns out good business news in the UK didn't sway the markets in the US. I'm Corey Evan with your business report on the Evan Miller Report. The Dow lost 279 big points to close at 17,826. The NASDAQ down 75 points at 49.31. And the S&P down 23 on 2,081. Greece growth projections will need to be significantly revised down, the European head of the International Monetary Fund told CNBC on Friday, as fears of a default weighed on European and U.S. stock bond markets. The IMF estimated on Tuesday that Greece's economy would grow by 2.5% this year and 3.7% in 2016, forecasts that bemused some analysts aware of the country's hefty debt burden and deadlocked talk national creditors. On Friday, Paul Thompson, director of the IMF's European department, admitted that the forecasts were unrealistic. Quote, our growth projection for this year will clearly have to be revised down significantly because of the current turmoil, because of the delay in completing the review. So once again, growth will underperform, Thompson told CNBC from the IMF's annual spring meeting in Washington, D.C. Stocks and bonds were hit across Europe and the U.S. on Friday, with Greece fears factoring in the slump. The country is seen as increasingly likely to default on its debt obligations as negotiations with its international bailout supervisors have failed to succeed in bringing about a further tranche of aid. Greece's finance minister, Yanis Varoufakis, is currently in meetings with U.S. and IMF officials in Washington that could determine the country's economic future. The IMF is Greece's key creditor. Another important meeting will take place on April 24th, when Eurozone finance ministers will meet to discuss Greece making economic and political reforms for more aid. Volkswagen AG Chairman Ferdinand Piëch isn't the chatty type, but the few words he utters in public have had the power to crush a career. That run may have ended today after a week-long standoff between Piëch and Chief Executive Officer Martin Winterkorn. Supervisory board leaders defied Piëch to back Winterkorn, saying they will propose the CEO's contract be extended past 2016. This is according to Bloomberg Business. The latest twist comes as Piëch, who turned 78 today, enters the final chapter of his career. In his 2 decades atop Volkswagen, he has perfected a style that pairs a cult-like following inside the German automaker with razor-sharp remarks to outsiders. This time, though, his target was a longtime confidant and VW's most successful CEO, as the company they built together rakes in record earnings and looks set to claim the top spot in the global car market from Toyota this year. Peach told influential German news magazine Der Spiegel that he was keeping his distance from Winterkorn in an interview published April 10th. The statement sent shockwaves through the company, but support soon started to roll in favor of the CEO. VW's powerful labor unions, the Porsche family of shareholders, and the German state of Lower Saxony all expressed their discontent with Peach's move. The story may not be over yet, however. After Peach called the career of Winterkorn's predecessor, Bernd Pichler into question, the board unanimously extended his contract only to fire him a few months later. Unlike the current situation under Winterkorn, the VW brand was losing money at that time, so hopefully things will start to look up for this CEO, and hopefully Mr. Peach will finally learn to say something nice instead of just saying nothing at all most of the year. And remember all that talk about Apple?
TV, huh?
Possibly. Anyway, remember all that talk about Apple racing to be the first company worth $1 trillion?
Yeah.
Well, it looks like the party's going to have to wait. Shares of Apple are sinking along with the rest of the market. Apple stock is down $1.53 today, but more importantly, shares have dropped $8.88 a share since peaking this year, erasing $51.7 billion in market value in just weeks. Savvy investors could have seen that coming. That leaves Apple with $726 billion of worth, which makes it most valuable in the Standard & Poor's, but that's still a far cry from $1 trillion. Traders are also pointing out that Apple stock is breaking down, seen by the stock falling below its average price over the past 50 days. That's usually not a great sign, although it's important to note that the same thing happened in January, only for the stock to soon after hit new highs. Some investors and analysts are still holding on to hope, for Apple's $1 trillion dream. FBR on Thursday started covering Apple stock and outlined exactly how the company will still reach the $1 trillion level in market value. FBR calculates the $1 trillion value by breaking Apple down into its various segments, putting prices. It's FBR for you, Jay. Just so you know, not to get him confused with NBR. Or do I need to start reading them out military style? I'm kidding.
You and the Swiss
Right.
Alps,
Anyway,
friend.
they
You
put
and the
price
Swiss
tags.
Alps.
Yes, I know. Anyway, they put price tags on each of them based on FBR's estimates for future profits. Anyway, they value our iPhones worth $611.7 billion and their service business worth $131.8 billion. And then they tacked on the $59 billion for the Mac unit, $34.8 for the Apple Watch, $26.4 for the iPad, and everything else is $17.8 billion.
So you figure all the
So
miscellaneous stuff, including wireless keyboards, wireless mouses, little electronic drawing pads, iPads, Apple TVs, all part of that others implication, correct?
That's what it would look like anyway.
All right. Looking good. What else you got in today's biz?
I think that's all I've got for today's business, Jay. So what do you got?
All right, well, I'll take it from here. Got some D.C. news to report on today, even though it's very little today. Wonder why. That has to do with the White House, I bet. Federal appeals judges on Friday peppered lawyers on both sides with questions in the fight over President Obama's move to shield millions of illegal immigrants from deportation. A Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals panel held a special hearing in a closely watched case that is holding up Obama's immigration action. A coalition of 26 states, led by the state of Texas, sued to block the plan. The hearing was on an appeal of a Texas judge's injunction. The Justice Department argued that Texas has no legal standing in the matter. Texas Solicitor General countered that granting legal status to illegal immigrants will be costly for Texas. The judges did not rule and took the case under advisement. Throughout the hearing, chants and drumming by pro-immigrant protesters outside the courthouse filtered into the packed courtroom. U.S. District Judge Andrew Hannon in Brownsville, Texas, granted a preliminary injunction back in February the 16th at the request of the states that oppose Obama's action. Hand's rulings have temporarily blocked the Obama administration from implementing any of their policies that would allow as many as 5 million illegal aliens to remain in the U.S. All right, we just talked UK elections for this year as those elections start on May 7th of this year. Now we move to U.S. politics as we start talking presidential politics for 2016. The GOP's most ambitious, according to some, stormed into New Hampshire today for an early state showdown that highlighted what they say are diversity, political changes, and sheer size of the GOP's 2016 presidential class. Nearly 20 Republican White House prospects were on the program for a weekend conference hosted by the state GOP, the year's first gathering, excuse the term, of its kind in the nation's primary state. Speakers range from the party's elite to its long shots. Former Florida Governor Jeb the Common Core Bush delivered a standing room only speech. I wonder why it was standing room. Must have been all those angry parents who were angry at him for allowing Common Core in the state of Florida, but I'm only guessing at that point because I'm not there. Maybe we need to talk to our AP reporters and see what's going on over there. Anyhow, moving on, also in attendance there was South Carolina Senator Lindsey the Moderate Graham, who has introduced himself to voters one at a time in the hallway. Each contender offered prescriptions for the party that hasn't won a presidential election in more than a decade. Bush made a passionate plea for bipartisanship, oh boy, our favorite word, on a day when his, quote, moderate brand of politics was on display. He broke with many conservatives on the environment by declaring that the climate is changing. Oh my goodness, Corey, I think that's breaking news. No, it's not.
Sounds like
Bush
the same thing that they've been spewing for the past, I don't know how many years. Probably as long as I've been alive.
I've lost track, but I will say, but Jeb Common Core Bush, I should state, is not only for Common Core. He's in effect going for climate change. Oh, who would have thought? Oh, it must have been he was so close to those beautiful Cubans.
He drank the seawater, didn't he?
Mm-hmm. That's all I got to say on that subject. Seawater indeed. Well, let's move on and talk about the other 10 prospective presidential candidates. Enough about Jeb the Common Core Bush. The first day of the two-day conference, another 10 potential candidates were scheduled to appear in the state on Sunday. Among the speakers, 10 current and former governors, 3 senators, and a congressman, a former UN ambassador, oh no, and former CEO. They range in age from 43 to 71 and include several, wait for it, Core, Spanish speakers and 1 woman. Of the major candidates, indeed. Of the major candidates considering a 2016 run, only retired neurosurgeon Ben Carson did not attend the weekend conference. He cited a scheduling conflict. All right, folks, that's the latest on the D.C. and primary election news for 2016. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for a little segment here on the program that me and Corey Evan love to call. What's that, Core?
It's our continuing battle against global socialism.
Thank you very much for that, Core. And we start out tonight with the first woman to serve as both governor and U.S. senator is now backing a campaign to put a female face on the $20 bill. Senator Jeanine Sheehan filed legislation this week that will create a citizens panel to recommend an appropriate choice to the Treasury Secretary. She is hoping to build on the work of Women on 20s, a national campaign pushing for the new $20 bills by 2020. And Corey Evan is showing his disgust, I suspect. The 100th anniversary of the constitutional amendment guaranteed women the right to vote. I think there are a lot of opportunities that we sometimes don't think about to point out the significant contributions women have made in U.S. history, Jeanine said, and this is one of those opportunities. The current portrait of former President Andrew Jackson has started out from the face of the $20 bill since the year 1928, but the paper currency is redesigned every 7 to 10 years to thwart counterfeiters, and the latest 20 notes entered into circulation back in 2003. Changes can be ordered by the Treasury Secretary or the President without an act of Congress, and Sheehan's bill wouldn't compel either to do so. She and other campaign supporters hope it will boost public support for redesigning the currency and spur a broader conversation about the achievements of American women. I just call it, ladies and gentlemen, feminism on steroids.
Right. What did Andrew Jackson do that offended women so much that they want him off the bill? I mean, it's pointless. I don't get why they'd want to replace Andrew Jackson. I mean, someday there's probably going to be a need, thanks to inflation, to bring back the $500 or $1,000 bills. Why not push for that? Push for someone to be on there. But to change out a current bill, I think they've gone too far. I mean, I understand, I appreciate women just as much as the next guy can, but at the same time, you don't need to get rid of something that's been tried and true.
Your guess is as good as mine, Corey. And speak of feminism, a feminist activist has opened a store in Pittsburgh. No wonder I felt that breeze blowing in from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. This will charge men more than women to protest the wage gap she believes is badly hurting women in the United States. The store, which will be operating in Pittsburgh from April the 1st until April the 30th, is called 76 by 100. According to its website, 100 is a traveling pop-up shop for gender wage equality. Each installment of the project offers work from exceptional women artists, makers, and entrepreneurs from throughout the U.S., priced to reflect the wage gap in its respective location. In Pittsburgh, men who enter the store will pay 100% of its cost. Meanwhile, women, in contrast, will only have to pay 76% of its cost. The site explains, quote, mirroring this inequality, male shoppers at this location will be charged 100% of the retail price of any item, while women and those who identify as women will be charged only 76% of this price. Events throughout the month will...
Wait a minute here. Do you mean to say that if I pretended to be a transgender for a day just to get in the shop and pay 76 cents for a candy bar instead of a full $1 for it, that I could get away with it?
I think, Corey, I've been misinterpreted completely what I said. That's 76%, not 76 cents. I think the bees are still in his ears up there.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand what's going on here. Because I'm trying to put 76% to 76 cents to the dollar to all that sort of stuff. Now I'm just absolutely kerfuffled, if you will.
We'll let you read the full story up on our Facebook page, ladies and gentlemen. The rest is there. I think I better move on because I feel like I'm in the middle of a game show right now. Oh boy, here we go. Let's move on, shall we? And we move on to welfare tonight in the U.S. state of Kansas, who has tightened its rules on how welfare recipients can spend their aid, banning the purchase of concert tickets, lingerie, no more Victoria's Secret, Corey, and dozens of other leisure items. U.S. Governor Sam Brownback signed the law on Thursday, saying it would encourage people to get back to work. Other states prevent welfare recipients from buying alcohol and cigarettes with government aid, but the revised Kansas list appears to be the most extensive in the United States. Meanwhile, Senate Minority Leader and Democrat Anthony Hensley called it a punitive and highly judgmental piece of legislation. Well, of course you do, Mr. Minority Leader. Of course you do. You know why? Because now you can't promise people free stuff to get into office. Wake up, McFly! Wake
I know,
up.
right? It's about time someone put restrictions into effect to make sure that these temporary aid programs aren't abused like this.
Well, you know what he's bummed about? You know what he's bummed about, Corey? He can't. he now has to give the interns money to go buy lingerie. And I'm speaking about the female ones, because the female ones are probably the ones who are on welfare who are working in his office. I'm just saying.
It's one of those things that makes me glad that Bob Filner can't get a public office again, at least for the moment.
Oh, wow. How did Bob Filner come into the conversation? I don't know, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen,
yeah,
since
I
this
know.
is a non-FCC radio station, I'm going to go on a limb today and says, this is Pull Out of Your Ass Friday.
Yeah,
because Corey Evans just pulling them out, and my goodness, they're going in so many directions right now, I don't even know where to go.
That's how my mind works sometimes.
Speak of directions, let's turn the direction from welfare and feminism over to racism, because we got everything under the rainbow in tonight's program. Stevenson College, part of the University of California, Santa Cruz, is apologizing to its students for serving Mexican food during their intergalactic night. In a letter sent out to students, the college apologized for having a Mexican food buffet while also serving spaceships and aliens. The college received complaints from some students saying the combination was racist because of the association between Mexicans and illegal immigrants. I don't see the connection, but let's continue on with the story. We would never want to make a connection between individuals of Latino heritage or undocumented students and aliens. And I am so sorry that our college night appeared to do exactly that, wrote Carol Goss, who took a picture of the activities before the complaints. After receiving those complaints, Goss said the event will demonstrate a cultural insensitivity on the part of program planters and thought it was an unintentional mistake. I recognize that this incident caused harm within our community and negatively impacted students. As a result, Dr. Gonzalez will require all cultural competence training for programmer staff. You know what that's called, Corey? That's called diversity training. I've done that. I've been forced to do that before. Okay, in addition to implementing mechanisms for future program planning that will ensure college programs are culturally sensitive and inclusive. And you know what I say to that? It's baloney! It doesn't even make any sense! Wake up already!
I know, right? There's the alarm clock going off. You probably can't hear it on air, but...
Dinner? If you serve Italian food, you're going to be saying you're catering to the Italians.
If you serve French cuisine, you're essentially pandering, I guess, to...
Right. And if you serve Chinese food, you're identifying yourself as a communist. So, you know what? Here's a proposition, ladies and gentlemen. Have your intergalactic night. Don't feed anybody. Have them bring food. Have a potluck.
Yeah, that's the better idea, I think. Even if they brought burgers and fries, I'd be happy.
Come on, really. Just go to In-N-Out. That's what a hamburger's all about. Really.
We're not sponsored by them yet, but In-N-Out, call us.
Yes, please call us. Indeed. All right, it's time. Enough of me ranting on a Friday. It just shows a sign that it's been a long week and that I'm tired, ladies and gentlemen. So at this note of the program, we're going to go ahead, give it over to Corey Evan, and he has those famous little words.
But first, before I do that, I've got a story. Remember, Jay? I don't
actually. In my rant, I completely forgot the rundown, which you decided to conveniently pull out of your ass and give me the updated one. So take it away, my friend.
Will do. The Federal Securities and Exchange Commission, according to the LA Times, recently opened an informal inquiry into whether LA Unified officials complied with legal guidelines in the use of bond funds for the now abandoned $1.3 billion iPads for All project. In particular, the agency was concerned with whether the LA Unified School District properly disclosed to investors and others how the bonds would be used, according to documents provided to the Times. District officials said they were optimistic that they had addressed the SEC concerns. The news of the inquiry came the same week that LA Unified officials demanded a refund from computer giant Apple over curriculum supplied on the devices by Pearson, which sells education services and materials worldwide. Pearson and supports the common crud, yes, rotten to the core. Pearson was a subcontractor to Apple under a contract approved by the Board of Education in June 2013. That fall, problems immediately plagued the rollout of the devices to campuses, and questions soon arose about whether Apple or Pearson had an unfair advantage in the bidding process. I bet they did. An ongoing criminal investigation by the FBI is looking into that matter. Current and former district officials have denied any wrongdoing. Apple has not responded to requests for comment. Pearson has consistently defended its actions, including on Thursday when top executive Michael Barber said that LA students would benefit if the district stayed the course with the company's product. That's one of those things that make me think, who are these people and who gave them the blessing to essentially drill whatever they wanted into our children's heads?
The crickets are still chirping on that one, Corey. I can't get an answer for you. All I gotta say is, parents, watch what your kids are doing, and watch what your kids in school are doing. Matter of fact, I'm gonna take it a one step further. If you're able to, financially able to, pull your kids out of what we call the public common crud system and homeschool your kids. They'll be a lot better off for it. A little bit more intelligent, a lot smarter, and guess what? They won't be stuck in Kansas buying underwear out of Victoria's Secret with our welfare money. It's
exactly.
Simple fact.
Exactly. And now I'll go ahead and do that little one-liner I always do at the end of our Global Socialism segments. So, when will school districts stop caving to the Bill Gates data gatherers? Why must we even bother with feminism in America? It's the Middle East that needs it. Just a joke. And who's been emptying their dog outside my studios?
Oh!
Yeah, I know. I just had to clean it up last weekend. Stay tuned for developments in our continuing battle against global socialism.
And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for Friday's edition of Lawsuits Across America.
And now it's time for Lawsuits Across America. The cases are real. All rise for the Honorable Corey Evans.
Thank you as always, Pat Hahn. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated and come to order. Lawsuits Across America for Friday are now in session. A New Jersey judge threw out this first item on the docket, challenging Trenton, New Jersey's paid sick leave law Thursday, and ruled the city is entitled to protect the health of its citizens by requiring businesses to give employees paid sick days, according to NJ.com. In a ruling watched closely by other New Jersey towns with similar paid sick leave laws, Superior Court Judge Mary Jacobson rejected the arguments of attorneys representing several of businesses' organizations that sought to have Trenton's laws voided. After hearing nearly 3 hours of arguments, Jacobson said she disagreed with the concerns raised by the businesses' organizations and in their complaint filed in March, finding that they had no merit. The business groups challenging the law, including the New Jersey Business and Industry Association, State Chamber of Commerce, New Jersey Food Council, New Jersey Merchants Association, New Jersey Restaurant Association, and the National Federation of Independent Businesses. Christopher Gibson, the attorney for the groups, argued that paid sick leave should be a statewide law rather than legislated locally by individual municipalities. Gibson also attacked the ability of Trenton officials to manage the implementation and enforcement. He called the ordinance vague, ambiguous, and contrary to New Jersey law. After the hearing, Gibson said that while he was disappointed in Jacobson's ruling, the hearing made it clear that the ordinance applies only to Trenton-based businesses. 9 municipalities in the state have enacted laws to mandate business owners offer paid sick days. The lawsuit by the business groups, however, focuses specifically on Trenton's law. The law was overwhelmingly approved by referendum in November. Gibson said he has not yet determined if he and his clients will appeal the ruling. And when they do, if they do, I'll bring it to you. Northern Michigan University doesn't believe that any student or administrator tried to stifle freedom of speech from the student newspaper, despite a lawsuit asserting the opposite, the school said in a statement. 4 student members of the board who oversee the student newspaper at the Marquette School and a top administrator who serves on the board were sued Thursday in federal court. Cheryl Reed, the paper's faculty advisor, and Michael Williams, the current managing editor, allege in their lawsuit that the board did not renew Reed's contract for next year and refused to hire Williams because they had been guiding the paper's tough coverage of the university. The university denied the claims once again in its statement issued late Thursday night. The school said students have denied anyone tried to curtail, limit, or impede any writer or editor on any story. Quote, the university has no reason to believe that the students or administration engaged in any inappropriate conduct or effort to infringe on press freedom, the school statement said. The university hopes that this matter can be resolved in a manner that is satisfactory to the entirety of our community, unquote. And civil rights groups settled their legal dispute with Ohio's elections chief on Friday over actions that trimmed early voting opportunities in the political background state. This, according to the AP. The agreement between Ohio Secretary of State Jon Husted and the Ohio chapter of the NAACP and other plaintiffs maintains elimination of the so-called Golden Week in which individuals could both register to vote, but adds weekend and evening voting hours even in areas of the state that previously hadn't offered them. The suit had challenged two early voting provisions. One was a directive by Husted that established uniform early voting times that in some cases restricted existing polling opportunities. Another was a GOP-backed law that eliminated Golden Week. Plaintiffs argued voting law changes hurt low-income black voters disproportionately. The state argued that the organizations couldn't prove an illegal undue burden was placed on black voters. The settlement retains a uniform statewide voting schedule in all 88 Ohio counties, as Husted wanted, but expanded the hours and days he had laid out. The schedule will hold for the remainder of Husted's 4-year term, which began in January and, under the deal, can't be legally challenged. Husted, a Republican, called the agreement a victory for Ohio voters. Specifically, the settlement allows the following early voting opportunities. For the 2016 presidential general election, provides an additional Sunday during the week of voting, third week of voting, that is, with election boards open 1 to 5 p.m., For the presidential primaries, expands weekday evening hours to 7 p.m. during the fourth week of voting. For regular municipal elections, primary elections, and special elections, expands hours during the fourth week of voting for weekdays from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. and on the Saturday before the election from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. The settlement dismisses a federal lawsuit in which the U.S. Justice Department had sided with the plaintiffs, saying in a court filing that the voting measures unfairly affected minority voters. Its provisions take effect after the May primary. Yeah, forget the coughing in the background. Someone who just happened to pass by and hear the story started hacking their brains out because they realized that this particular suit is full of hacking nonsense.
Aye, that's the way.
And on that bombshell, I declare today's lawsuits across America case dismissed. And Jay, take it away.
All right, thank you very much, Corey. And you know what, ladies and gentlemen? I may be coming forward those 3 days that Corey took off. I did have to take over on the entertainment news. I only did it one day, ladies and gentlemen. I hate to say, I'm hooked. Not hooked enough. I'm going to start watching the Kardashian sisters on E, but I'm still
you better not.
Slightly hooked. So
yeah, I would expect that you'd be wanting to post up no Kardashian parking signs on your property.
Matter of fact, any Kardashians that step 1 inch on this property will be shot. I got a strict limit on Kardashians. They can't even show up on my satellite dish. And you know what that means, Corey Evan. Alright, starting off with the entertainment news tonight. Plans for a Hollywood version of Doctor Who are part of the latest revelations from Sony Pictures' computer hack. According to the BBC, they said there was a tremendous interest in the idea during a meeting with Sony last year. Although no plans were finalized, the meeting was disclosed in hacked emails made public on WikiLeaks 6 months after the cyber attack on Sony. WikiLeaks had made the information from Sony available in a searchable format for the first time. Sony said it strongly condemns the release, which amounts to more than 170,000 emails and 30,000 documents. The new documents reveal more about the internal wranglings at Sony's film division, but so far nothing is as embarrassing as the previously released material. Last year, Sony's co-chairman Amy Pascal and producer Scott Rudin came under fire for a series of racially insensitive emails about President Obama's taste in films, which were among the first to be leaked. Rudin was also exposed for calling Angelina Jolie minimally talented and a spoiled brat. And you know what? On that one, I don't often agree with Hollywood hacks there, Corey Evan, but you know what? I think I do agree with Scott Rudin on this one. I do believe Angelina Jolie is a bit of a spoiled brat. And considering she wants her daughter to be a boy?
What?
Yeah.
That's disgusting.
See?
Come on, let them be what they are. Don't
So,
encourage them to be
Angelina
so-
Jolie, you are minimally talented. Congratulations. Thank you.
Yes, and you get the one-hand clap.
Thank you very much. All right, moving on. Before I send it over to Corey Evan for the rest of the today's entertainment headlines, you remember yesterday we played the audio of the new Star Wars Force Awakens trailer. Well, you might not even have to go see the movie. You just might want to fly the plane. What am I talking about? Well, it may not be the droid you're looking for, but a plane painted to look like R2-D2 could be the next best thing for Star Wars fans waiting for The Force Awakens. But you may have to go all the way to Japan for it. Japan's All Nippon Airways, also known as ANA, has unveiled a Boeing 787 Dreamliner, decorated to look like the robot. The cockpit and front half of the white fuselage are painted with blue panels in the shape of those on the droid. Star Wars is also ran on the body of the plane behind the wing. Images released by the company show the tail in an ANA normal livery. And I'm looking at the pictures, it looks quite the nice plane there. All Nippon Airways says the jet will go into service on an international route later this year ahead of the film's release. Fans got their first look, of course, at the new teaser trailer for Star Wars Force Awakens. Pardon that sound in the background, ladies and gentlemen. Back to the story. Fans got their first look at the new teaser trailer for the Star Wars The Force Awakens, the 7th installment of the film franchise, yesterday. And as we stated yesterday on the Evan Miller Report, we played the audio from that audio trailer here on the Evan Miller Report. And you can always go to our previous shows on Spreaker.com/SHR Media, or you can go to the iHeartRadio and search the Evan Miller Show. Now for the rest of the day's entertainment news, here's Corey Allen.
Thank you, as always, Jay. Thank goodness we're not all back in high school again. I mean, I remember my years of high school. Britt McHenry, an ESPN reporter based in Washington, reminds us of that blessing this past week when she was caught on video berating a woman whose company had towed McHenry's car. Quote, "I'm on television and you're in a trailer, honey," McHenry said in a tirade released online yesterday. "That's all I care about is just taking people's money," she added. "With no education, no skill set, just wanted to clarify that," unquote. She went on to blast the woman's alleged lack of teeth and advise her to lose some weight, baby girl. Yeah, that's what she actually said in the video. So, yeah, that pretty much hits every note on the "do you know who I am" scale. Insisting that fame, or at least being on TV, making them better, check. Using higher education as a cudgel, check. Citing looks to suggest some sort of moral superiority, check. The idea of McHenry as a mean girl, attractive, entitled, arrogant, and awful, that's according to the writer of this, that's not my words, fits so perfectly that it's amazing she wasn't self-aware enough not to say some of what she said, even if she really believed it. There are some thoughts that are always best left unsaid, and, quote, "I'm in the news, sweetheart, I will sue this place," is one of them. That's not a lesson McHenry apparently learned in her life, which, by her own reckoning, has been characterized by being beautiful and awesome all the time, again, according to the article, not according to me, and that outburst did earn her a 1-week suspension from ESPN. McHenry for forgetting that high school only lasts 4 years and then you're supposed to grow up. You had the worst week in Washington. Congratulations, I guess.
Yeah, well, there's a certain way of acting professional and not acting professional, and well, she was not so professional, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, she was the latter, absolutely. Speaking of unprofessional, Sarah Jessica Parker's HBO follow-up to Sex and the City is a comedy about, get this, marital woes. Access Hollywood tells me the premium cable channel told them on Thursday that Parker will star in a half-hour series titled Divorce. She plays a woman who's finding that making a break from her marriage is harder than anticipated. Thomas Hayden Church of Spider-Man 3 and Sideways fame plays her husband. Also in the cast are Molly Shannon and Talia Balsam as close friends of Parker's character, Francis. The 50-year-old Parker started as relationship columnist Carrie Bradshaw in Sex and the City from 1998 to 2004 on HBO, and in 2 big-screen movies, as you know. Divorce will shoot in New York this year, HBO said.
Or Terry Bradshaw, because we don't want to confuse him with the sports guy, Carrie Bradshaw.
Carrie Bradshaw with a C at the end.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah, they're shooting in New York this year, and they haven't yet told us when it's supposed to debut. That, when we do find out, I'll warn you in advance, Jason.
Thank you. I'll stay far away. All right, looks like we may have lost there. Corey Evan there in the midst of things. Let's see if we still have him. Corey, do we still have you, sir? What? No, we do not, unfortunately. Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. As I stated earlier in our B story, sometimes these things get a little buzzed up. And we were a little buzzed up in tonight's entertainment report, one of the wildest ones of the week, I believe, considering the circumstances. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, just to... here's Corey Evan, right now. Bees got stuck in the entertainment report, did they?
Yes. As I was saying before I was so rudely interrupted, the Miami-based Univision network said Friday the popular Sábado Gigante will end its weekly broadcasts on September 19th. Created by its Chilean-born host, the boisterous presenter with a huge grin known as Don Francisco, the weekly 3-hour show Sábado Gigante long has been Univision's most popular program. With an average of 2.2 million viewers each week, the show remains number 1 on Saturday nights among Hispanics in the U.S. and was up this season among younger viewers, according to the Nielsen Company. The show also is broadcast in more than a dozen countries throughout Latin America. Univision didn't say why it was ending Sábado Gigante, nor what kind of programming will fill its slot. The network said Don Francisco, whose real name is Mario Kreutzberger, will continue to work on special programs and a telethon that has raised hundreds of millions of dollars over the years to benefit disabled children. The details of the decision will be revealed by Kreutzberger on the broadcast this Saturday, according to a network spokesperson who was not authorized to be quoted by name. A Univision executive who spoke on the condition of anonymity because the person wasn't authorized to speak for Kreutzberger said the host had decided it was time to end the show and to end it with the closing of the broadcast season. It aired for the first time in Chile in 1962 and moved to Miami in 1986. And just to get you up to speed of what Sábado Gigante is, Jay, it's a variety show that mixes humor, amateur talent contests, celebrity interviews, and human interest stories, and has been a weekly staple for many Hispanic families in the U.S. Sometimes with several...
So let me get this straight. It's like an inside edition, Wayne Brady, whose line is it anyway, Price is Right, and what's that other game show that's on right before it here in the LA market? Oh,
Let's Make a Deal.
Let's Make a Deal. It's all that mixed into one show. Wow, sounds like an episode of Pointless.
Among other things. Yeah, in a release from the network, Alberto Quirana, president for programming and content for Univision Communications, called the 74-year-old Kreutzberger one of the most beloved and legendary entertainers in the world and an innovative and inspirational force in the television industry throughout his career.
Sounds like a typical BS to me. If he's so beloved, why are they deciding to sack him?
Maybe he's getting close to retiring or something like that. But I think that they should leave the show on the air if it's that popular, because, hey, if they like the show that much, why cancel it? Just hand the production down to someone else and get a new host, give them the blessing and whatnot, and just let them take over.
Well,
in fact, I have a feeling that's...
do it. Soap opera's not popular on broadcast television anymore. Where'd they move it to? Well, there's a network
Hispanic
for that.
television, yeah.
Well, it wasn't Hispanic television per se. I'm speaking American soaps. When we
they're on SoapNet these days.
Over to SoapNet. You see where I'm going here? So look it. There's. I'm sure there is. Excuse the term. I'm not trying to be racist. There is plenty of Mexican television stations who have cable stations down there. Why don't you move it from Mexican broadcast cable over to Mexican cable? And I am sure, and Corey Evan can confirm this to me, whether this is true or not, I'm sure there is a Mexican version of the Game Show Network.
Possibly. Although I haven't heard of it as of yet. If I find out about it, I'll let you know. But I do know that recently when Mundo Fox launched, which is a Spanish-speaking version of Fox Network, they did include a Spanish-speaking version of Minute to Win It. I don't know if it's still broadcasting or not. I'll verify that and get back to you on that. But they did import a Mexican game show host to host that, and it's broadcast on U.S. television. So, sky's the limit on these things.
Certainly right. All right, Corey Evan with the entertainment news tonight. Thank you very much for that. And ladies and gentlemen, we thank you for being with us this week. It's been a very big week. We had a lot of great guests this week, including Ed Martin, the president of the Eagle Forum, was with us this week. Glad to have him. We had Orleen Kurla with us, giving us an update on HR 5, and just so much information out there this week. So glad that we were able to bring it to you. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, that is the Evan Miller Report for this Friday, April the 17th, 2015. I'm Jason Miller. And for Corey Evan, who's out there in the windy area of Hemet, California, we wish you a great night.
Media, we thank you for listening.
Oh, there's Corey.
I'm sorry. Yeah, there we are. Yeah, follow us on Facebook.com/The Evan Miller Report and tweet us at EM Radio Report. You'll be glad you did. For all of us here at SHR Media, we thank you very much for listening. Coming up next is the weather.
Yep, the National Weather with Nick Miller is next. Thanks so much for being with us. We'll talk to you on Monday, everybody. Don't forget the SHR Weekend News with Corey Evan.
In the Rockies, but there is some of that in the forecast for the next few days around this area of low pressure. Utah into Colorado has had some of that snow, and the threat continues even into the start of the weekend. So even some of that snow falling to relatively low levels as well. So we could see some of that mixed with rain in Denver, for example. The greater concern, though, across the USA, the torrential downpours still affecting southern areas here, with this severe weather line pushing further north with the risk of isolated tornadoes, certainly large hail and gusty winds as that sweeps further east. Looking northwards into Canada, we're seeing a bit of rain heading in here, a succession of weather systems arriving along the coast of the Gulf of Alaska. Head further south, though, bone dry still into California, but there's that snow into the Rockies. Now, we're dry for the big cities of the northeast on Saturday. So New York with a temperature of 23 Celsius, 73 Fahrenheit. A few showers popping up in the southeast. But as you can see, the major active weather is further west. And all of that is sweeping eastwards. So eventually, see the big change here. We're going to push that to area of heavy rain and gusty winds through Montreal and New York during Monday. In Vancouver, though, warming up in the sunshine and staying fine too across much of the west.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.